Okay, so at this stage, hopefully you're familiar with the process of unpacking an exam question. So this is the sample report that we looked at, and as you can see, we've already gone through the class the process of unpacking that question. So we've circled the key descriptor, in this case evaluate, we've underlined the content, we've put a box around any limiting word, we don't want any tourist destination, we actually want a significant one, and there's a box around the country's GDP because that's what we're focusing on. We're going to model an evaluation paragraph that looks at one of these main features, so we look at man-made. So what we would normally do in a classroom situation is we brainstorm all the content for man-made. So we've already done that. So we just pretend that we've already asked the class and here's all the content. But what we want to do now is we also want to brainstorm the language of evaluation. So what does an evaluation paragraph look like? Well, the students won't know that unless they've got lots of different types of language of evaluation. So what we'll do first, before we write the paragraph, is in this box here, we're going to brainstorm some key evaluation techniques. So we'll just put that up so that we'll pretend we've done it, and then it will be up here in a minute. Okay, so we've just pretended that we brainstormed with the class, and so this is what we've come up with. We've come up with lots of different types of the language of evaluation, such as triggers, is fundamental to, is difficult to ascertain, and so on. And this would be from the document, the language of evaluation sheet, which we would share with the students at the start of the unit. So from here, what we're going to do now is construct an evaluation or a judgment paragraph using both content, a mixture of content, and a mixture of this language of evaluation. So the first thing we'll do is we'll start off, we'll try and use a Peel paragraph, but this is probably more higher level, so at this stage we might be trying to get the students to move away from a Peel paragraph, but we would always start with our main point, and we're going to look at a man-made feature, and obviously we're going to link it back to the country's GDP. So we might start off by saying something like, man-made features are also vital to the local economy of Cusco, and as a consequence to the country's GDP. And as you can see, straight away we're starting to use a bit of the language of evaluation. So that's the first sentence. Okay, so now what we want to do is model from obviously the main body or the elaboration and example part of the Peel paragraph. So we might say something like 2 major tourist attractions. So we're just adding in here some content because we need to let the examiner know, or they need to let the examiner know they've got some content. So 2 major tourist attractions close to Cusco are Machu Picchu and the Inca Trail. So again, we might then try and bring in a bit of the language of evaluation. So down here we've got essential to or fundamental to. So I might say these are fundamental to the local economy, or I could have said Cusco again, because of the large number of tourists that visit, spend money, and drive the local economy. So I've realised that I've said local economy 3 times now, but what I'd probably do if I was doing this in class is just go with that and then go back and edit the paragraph afterwards, because what I'm really showing the students is I'm not this perfect writer who can write everything brilliantly in one go. I too have to go back and edit it. So I won't do this for the purpose of this video, but at the end of this I'd go back and say, look how many times I've got local economy and what else can I put in here. So what I want to do now is talk about job creation. So this is going to create jobs, but again I want to try and use some of this. So I could use maybe contributes to. I don't think I've used that yet. Maybe I'll use underpins. So I think I'll use underpins because that's quite a strong word. So I'll probably say this foreign currency underpins the whole area, as most of the jobs revolve around tourism. And I probably could have said maybe there, yeah, I was going to say I could have said financial health, but I think I'll leave it at that. Then what I want to do is I want to bring it back to this, because we're talking about the country's GDP. I've just spoken so far about the local area. I've just spoke about Cuzco. So I could then say the consequences. So the consequences of Cuzco's popularity mean that Peru in general benefits from this inflow of tourist dollars. And I might talk about some of the other areas. So I might say to a large degree, major centres with airports will benefit and become, running out of the room, and become richer and prosper, whereas more remote areas could still live, or could still remain, is probably a better way of phrasing it, could still remain in abject poverty. And so that's sort of really, I put some examples in, I've built in a lot of aberration. So if we're convincing the students that we want them to then link or sum this up, and because this is an evaluation paragraph, I want to really end on an evaluative statement. So I might say something like, I've already used to a lesser degree or a greater degree, I could have used that. So I might use maybe it's difficult to ascertain. So I might finish by saying something like, so maybe the degree to which different areas benefit is difficult to ascertain, but clearly the country's GDP will grow if there is foreign income from tourism. So that's one paragraph I've covered on man-made features. If we go back here to the brainstorm, I've covered a couple of these. I've looked at the consequences of, which is the language of evaluation. I think it's in there twice. And I might change one of those again when I go back to my editing process. So I might say, instead of a consequence of, maybe I could say, is a repercussion of, for example, or something like that. I've covered to a greater degree. I've covered fundamental to, difficult to ascertain. I think I've covered underpins, and there's a couple more. If we go back up here, I've mentioned Machu Picchu, the Inca Trail. I haven't mentioned any of the trendy cafes and bars, the Spanish architecture, the cathedrals. So maybe that could even be another paragraph on man-made features. We don't just have to have one paragraph on each of them, and I've probably mentioned some of the things down here. So overall, we probably can't read much of the writing, but you get the idea. If you read this, there's very little content in there. I haven't talked about all the different things that are in Cuzco, all the different cathedrals, all the different sites, the brickwork and the architecture and the artworks and so on. I haven't talked about Machu Picchu, that was an ancient Incan ruin, and got into detail. What I've actually done is linked the information from there to what the question asked. I've evaluated in terms of the country's GDP. So that's really what we want the students to do. They shouldn't be regurgitating information. They should be drawing links between the knowledge that they have to what the question asks them, in this case the country's GDP.